What up, y'all? Steffen from Berkshire Bike and Board here. I've been in the business for almost 30 years now, and I'm going to show you how to install your cleats on your new pair of road shoes to make sure they're in the optimum position. Here, let's go. So there are a couple things you need. You need a new pair of shoes, you need an Allen key, new set of cleats, and arguably you want some grease, because putting grease on the bolts will make a huge improvement about when it's time to replace them. You'll actually be able to get them out of the holes. So the reason that we want to do these things is, first and foremost, injury prevention. If your cleat is in the correct position, you're less likely to have any kind of injuries. Cycling is a repetitive motion, and therefore getting the cleat in the right position is important. Next is that if the cleat is in the position that is optimal for you and where I'm going to recommend it, you're going to have less fatigue over a longer ride. And so to me, that's important. The longer you can ride with less fatigue, the less likely you're going to get a cramp. You're going to ride longer, you're going to be happier. So let's get into it. Here we're using a pair of Shimano SPDSL. Whether you're using look, time, it doesn't matter. The way I like to start is by getting the washers in their position. And then I like to drop the bolts into their respective positions. This just makes cleat installment that much easier. I flip my cleats over, I put a dab of grease on each hole. That way when it's time to replace your cleats, it will be a lot easier. So first and foremost, we're just going to get this started. We're not going to tighten anything down, and I'm going to show you how to find the ultimate position. I've just got it started. Cleats are in there, they're loose. Do this to the other set. All right, now the next part is important, because we need to know how your feet naturally hang. Because when you are pedaling, whether you are a toe straight or a toe out or a toe in, we want to mimic that riding position. Because ultimately, when cleat is mounted down, all cleats have float. Shimano's, depending on the color of the cleat, will have a different amount of float. It will be denoted on the box. And what float is the amount of movement your foot will have inside the pedal. And this is important. As you go around, your foot naturally moves just a little bit. And so we want to naturally be in the middle of that float position. You don't want to set up your cleats so where you're like this and you're already at the end of the float and the float's this way. So it's important that you get the right position for your feet mounted to your cleat. And the way you do that is you want to sit on the end of a desk or a table, and you let your feet hang, and you're going to see the natural position. So as you can see, my feet naturally hang. My left foot, which is this one, has more splay than my right foot. I've had some knee surgeries over the years, and ultimately I want to dictate that position on the bottom of my foot. So my right foot is a little bit more forward. It's not completely straight, but my left is a little bit more, so I'm going to dictate that same cleat position. So now when I go back to the cleat, I'm going to remember that position, and I'm going to tighten down the cleats. Because there's two axes on cleats, we have this position, right, where your toe is pointed, and we also have fore and aft. I have a different philosophy than most, even though quite a few people have the same philosophy, and that is where to position my cleats. I'm a strong proponent of pushing your cleats as far back as you can possibly go. And here's my logic. The further your foot is forward on the cleat, the less likely are you to engage your calves. You're going to engage bigger muscles like your glutes and your hamstrings and your quads. The further forward your cleats are, you're going to engage the smaller muscle groups like your calf, which aren't as powerful. Now, there's a downside to having your cleats all the way back, and that is if you're a sprinter and you want to incorporate and get all of the muscle for sprinting, you're going to want your feet further forward. But since most of us are not sprinters, most of us are casual cyclists, we want to go out with our friends, ride 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 miles with our friends and not feel like we're fatigued at the end of it, it's generally better to slide your cleats all the way back. Another way to think about it is if there was an exercise where you had to stand on this cleat, on this table, for hours, where would you want your foot? Would you want your foot here, or would you want your foot further forward? The further forward you are, you're getting more support from your skeleton and your muscles than you are further back. So this is another part of my logic. The further forward you are, the easier it is for you to be less fatigued and be able to ride longer. So this is my right foot. So I'm gonna now, I know my right foot, I splay a little bit, so I'm gonna slide it all the way back, and I'm gonna turn the cleat in just a little bit, and I'm gonna snug that down. I'm not gonna make it super tight, but I'm gonna make it so it's not gonna go anywhere. I'm gonna then flip it over and go, okay, where's that toe pointing? Is that toe pointing out just a little bit? So like if this is perfectly parallel, my toe is pointing out, which is exactly where I want it to be. I then will snug this all the way down. And we want to use the German torque spec, good and tight. Sorry for all you for making that dad joke. I'm a dad, can't help it. But we want them snug, not over tight because you can over torque them, but snug. Now my left foot, I'm splayed a little bit more, so I want to pull it all the way back, and I'm gonna turn it to the left even more. There is some play here which you can see this way. So ideally, this is where if you get a fitting, you might get into where your cleat is side to side. And this is basically, if you've got wider hips, you're gonna want your cleat in, which is pushing your foot outboard, or vice versa. If you're skinny, you're gonna want your cleat inboard. But generally, I try to put it in the center. I'm fairly average, but I'm gonna turn my cleat in. It will naturally push the cleat forward because this is my axis point, so it can't go any further. So I'm gonna start there. My cleat is pointing to where I roughly think it needs to be. I snug it down. I like to hold a finger like, okay, where's my toe pointing? That looks pretty good. So once you've gotten this far, I'm gonna give this the last little snug. Now it's time to test them. Two things we're looking for when we test them is that, like I said in the beginning, when your feet are in your pedals and you are in a natural position, you should be able to move your foot back and forth ever so slightly, and you should feel like you're up against the edge either way. We want that float to be there, so as we're pedaling, our foot can naturally move because it naturally does as we're going through the pedal cycle. And then the last thing to check is, because this foot is pretty angled in, I'm gonna make sure that it's not making contact with my crank, because if it's too far in and it's making contact with my crank, two things will happen. I will destroy my shoe, and believe it or not, you can put a hole in your crank. So that's basically how to set up your cleats. It's pretty much the same thing for a mountain bike cleat, just on a smaller 2-hole cleat, but basically follow the same principles. Last little hot tip is that when these cleats wear out, which they will wear out, you will not have to redo this whole process for your next set of cleats. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take a permanent marker and you're gonna mark each of the 3 axes on the cleat, and when you go to take the cleat off, you'll know exactly where to put your next set of cleats, and so you only have to do this once on this pair of shoes. If you get a new pair of shoes down the line, you will have to redo this process. I'm Steffen. If you liked what you see, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, helps the YouTube algorithm, and hopefully you'll stick around for some more videos. You can see them up here, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.